Thanks everyone for joining us for the second talk, which is all about building a luxury brand from scratch. And we've got two men here who know how to do just that. Luca Faloni, of course, Luca Faloni, one of, I'd say, the world's finest cashmereers.
Potentially.
Potentially, okay. And Nick English, who set up Bremont watches and now runs Moke, the amazing beach buggy brand, and also Yada LED, the most beautiful pencils and writing implements on the planet.
They are very gorgeous.
They really are. So what we're going to do is we're going to chat for 35, 40 minutes, and then we're going to go out to the crowd and get some questions from you guys too. But yes, thanks everyone for being here. Let me get my notes in order. I think my first question is about the word luxury. This is called building a luxury brand from scratch. We work in luxury lifestyle publishing, but I actually kind of don't like the word luxury. Sometimes it strikes me as it hits the wrong note, and it's a little bit naff, perhaps. Do we need a better word for luxury? And if so, can you furnish us with one here today? How do you like to describe your businesses when you're talking about them?
I also don't like the word. To me, luxury should be about quality of material, quality of the product. But over the years, it has become more synonymous of high price point, perceived scarcity. And so all the luxury brands are effectively creating a fake perception of luxury, just increasing the prices, reducing the supply. So I don't like the word, to be honest.
No. Nick, what do you think?
I kind of think if you have to use the word luxury, you know, you've still got a lot of story to tell. I think luxury for me is more about leading the way. I don't think if you're a true luxury brand, you're sort of more leaders than followers, and you can dictate which direction you want to take. I think it's also about sort of craftsmanship with a purpose. I think you're obviously building a beautiful product, and I think it's a product which you probably don't need. I know it sounds awful. You know, if you're, you know, for a watch, for example, you can buy a watch for £3 and it'll tell the time. But actually you can also buy a watch for £3 million, but it's a different, so it's a feel of longing, it's a feel of belonging to that brand. So it is that purpose of craftsmanship that's for me.
Yeah, and the most amazing thing about Bremont, of course, is that it's brought the heritage of British watchmaking back to the fore. We were sort of, back in the day, the British watchmakers were the best in the world, and we were slightly overtaken.
I could bore you we could have 2 hours on the British history of watchmaking. There is a beautiful history of British watchmaking. It goes back a couple hundred years, and you know, the first ship's chronometers and Greenwich. You know, if you take any watch, it could be any watch out there, mechanical watch, probably half the innovation, and that watch would have come from British shores. And obviously, the world sets its time by Greenwich, not by Geneva. So that's a bit of a point in the right direction there as well. But yeah, there's a lovely heritage.
Yeah, absolutely. And Luca, you are obviously an Italian, which gives you about 5 style points on any Englishman, I always think. But tell us about your journey growing up, where you started and how you came to found the brand.
So yeah, I grew up in Turin, and I left Italy when I was about 20 years old, and I lived 7 or 8 years abroad. And in those years, I never thought about it, but I was always going back to Italy when I visited my parents to buy clothes. So I never bought clothes abroad, and I never thought too much about it. Then, because obviously the price point as well that you can get in Italy, the quality that you can get easily available is not as available abroad. And in about 2012, I was in San Francisco, and I came across the direct-to-consumer brands, which at the time were essentially starting a brand online, skipping the whole wholesale channel. So traditional brands would sell for, the legacy brands would sell for 8-10 times cost, and using the direct-to-consumer model, you could sell for 3-4 the same times cost, the same quality. And immediately I thought, wow, this whole direct-to-consumer model could be great to sell the best Italian quality at a more accessible price. However, still a premium price point, so you can build on a brand, basically.
Absolutely. And Nick, your origin story is quite remarkable. It starts with a plane crash, really. Is that fair to say, with Bremont?
Not the most auspicious start,
no.
But it was, my brother and I grew up. I set the Bremont up with my brother back in 2002. You can tell from the bags under the eyes, that's from working with my brother for so long. it was our father was an amazing, inspiring guy. He was an aeronautical engineer, went to Cambridge, did his PhD there, and we grew up in a workshop with him making things, so restoring old planes, cars, bikes, but clocks, one of those things as well. But he's also madly into flying, so we grew up going to air shows. We're a bit this high, too small to see out the airplane, but also too small for the CA to see you in the airplane, so we could do the air shows and things. And then as we grew up, we started doing a lot of these vintage air shows ourselves. And then one day back in 1995, I was practicing for an air display with my father, and something went wrong with the aircraft. And I was in my early 20s at that point, and we we smashed into a field. He died, and I spent next few months in intensive care and broke 30, 40 bones. And that was the point. I'd been working in the city, and I went back into the city. And I remember my boss at the time coming up to me, and he was about 10 years above me in the sort of the ladder, so to speak. It's in corporate finance. And he came up to me, and he's probably about 20 stone. He's very out of shape, and he was sweating profusely. He came over to me. I think he's on his third wife as well. So all these indicators weren't great. And he came up to me and he said, "Look, Nick, if you carry on working like this, because I just worked all night, because if you worked all night, you got a free shirt from Pink's." And so that was a great incentive to work all night, especially when your washing was piling up. Anyway, he came up to me and said, if you carry on like this, you could be in my position in 10 years' time. And I just looked at him. I thought, actually, this isn't really what I want. So I left, rang up my brother. He was doing something similar. And we both quit. Well, actually, to be fair, I said to my brother, I'm thinking of quitting. And he rang me back 3 minutes later and said, I've quit. And I thought, oh, gosh. So I had to quit. And we left. We got involved with a business restoring historic aircraft. We had a business prior to Bremont, which we built up and sold. And then we just loved making things. So this whole, we'll talk about the history of British watch, bringing that back and setting up workshops and things in the UK. So back in 2002.
Incredible. So we've got that, your boss, really, to thank for lots of things. How's he doing now? Is he in better health?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, no, he's good. He's good.
Okay, good to hear. Luca, what about you then? What's your origin story? Do you remember the moment you made your first product and put it live on the Luca Faloni website?
Yeah, so we started from a bag. I always wanted to create a total look. And my theory was, let's start from accessories because there are no sizes, so you can more easily sell them online. The problem was that also many other companies were thinking the same thing at the time. But so we started from a travel bag, and it took me about 6 months of prototypes back and forth. The artisans hated me in Italy, they still do, but they have funny stories of the early days. And eventually we launched it, and after that we moved into leather goods and then linen and cashmere, which became our leading categories, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always interested in names, naming anything, but naming particularly brands, because it's so important early on. Luca Faloni, we can see how you got there. But was it a difficult decision when you were still a young man to put your name right above the door, so to speak?
It's quite a cool name, though, isn't it?
Works, doesn't it?
I got lucky there. It was a difficult decision. There are some brands that, especially in the activewear, I see some names here that come up with a gimmicky name. But more on the fashion side, if you look historically, most of the brands are named after the founders or the founding family. I remember one day I was really undecided, should I start with a gimmicky name or with my own name? And I went down the streets, I looked at all the brands, and I focused a lot on the brands I didn't know, and all the ones that seemed like a real brand had the name of a person rather than a gimmicky name. And it was a difficult choice because you cannot go back, first of all, right? If it doesn't work, then your friends will make fun of you for life. If it works and you want to sell, someone else owns your name. So cannot go too well, whatever happens. But it's the choice that makes sure also you put 100% of yourself in it. That was important.
Absolutely. I think Gentleman's Journal founder Harry Jarman had a swimwear brand called Harry's. Did it? No? It doesn't. Anyway, he's now got a very lovely brand called Gentleman's Journal, which is much more important. But anyway, Nick, your origin story of the name Bremont is again pretty unusual and out there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for the first 3 years of setting up the brand, we didn't have a name. And our surname was English. So having a British watch brand called English, I think the irony would have been lost on a lot, and trying to trademark and everything. You have to think about all these things. Trademarking anything these days is really, really difficult, because everything seems to be used. So, so for the first 3 years, we didn't have a name. And then as we were getting to the stage when the first prototypes were coming out with watch written on it, that was the brand. We couldn't think of a brand. And then it came down to, after my accident, my brother and I used to do these flying trips, take an old airplane and fly in our teens down through Europe and stuff. And after my accident, my brother said, let's go and do one of these trips. So we went off, and it was an old 1930s airplane, and we ended up having a forced landing in this field. And if you do that in England or America, you apologize to the farmer and buy his wife a bottle of champagne or something, and have a cup of tea with them. But in France, it's illegal. So the airplane gets impounded and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, long story short, we ended up landing in this pea field, and this chap came out to help us. And we just thought, oh, God, this is going to be a nightmare. And he was very enthusiastic, late septuagenarian, and he said, look, push the airplane in the barn. It's peeing with rain. So we pushed the airplane in the barn, and we stayed there. The weather was so bad, we stayed there 3 or 4 days, and his name was Antoine Bremont. So it was a sort of a nod to our father as well. And because if our father's in his 40s when he died, but had he lived another 30 years, this guy would have been our father in 30 years. Had a workshop, and he's into making stuff. It was very sweet. So that's where the brand came from.
That's brilliant. And it's one of those things that you hear it and it just works right from the start. It sounds like a very...
Although it is a French name for a British brand, which people do... why is that?
What are some of the brand names you guys love then, aside from your own? What do you think of if someone out here is at the very early stage of their business and they're trying to think of that name, what kind of advice would you give them, and what are some of the ones maybe you guys love? Luca?
I mean, when you think brands that are successful, Ferrari comes to my mind is like a dream for every kid, Hermes, those are the true brands out there. Many of the others have been compromised over the years, or the quality has decreased. But the goal is always to create a better brand, and that's why you start your own sometimes. Okay,
excellent. Nick, what do you think is good naming advice?
It's difficult with brands, isn't it? Because in a way, if it sounds really all right, in a way I'm slightly, as soon as a brand gets too everywhere, I kind of lose my interest a little bit. And I think independence, I think that sense of belonging, as I said before, is very, very important. But you can have everything from a very cool pizza oven, Grozny pizza ovens. They're like little, if Apple were doing pizza ovens, you could, a brand like that, and that's the name of the chap. And you've got, Singer cars, they're brilliant. There's all these lovely items, but the brand itself, I think, it has to come from the person really itself.
Absolutely. You were both starting out in fields, watches, luxury menswear that have huge establishment players, really, really big competitors. Did you know that at the start? Did you feel that you were a very small fish in a big pond? And do you think that was an advantage in some way to be the live startups? Or was it just terrifying?
From our perspective, it was a real opportunity. I think all of the brands we were up against were the big groups. So you had the Swatch group, you had the Richemont, you had obviously Rolex and big independents and LVMH brands. But we were obviously very, very tiny. Nobody really cared what you're doing. We could be far more reactive. We could do things at a turn of a coin. We were very early into social media. I mean, this is 20-something years ago, when luxury brands were just staying actually quite well away from social media. And it was the way we could grow, and we had a story. We realized that storytelling was very, very important for us. This was the time where actually getting press in magazines, national papers and that sort of stuff made a big, big difference. I think now it's a lot harder. I think things have changed completely, the way you market a brand, obviously. But it just... for us, it was, we could just do stuff that other brands probably is too dangerous to do. And I think that allowed us to grow and and we only needed, Giles and I view as, you only need a very small percentage of a huge market to make quite a lovely small business.
Absolutely. Luca, what do you
I think when you're small, there are a lot of advantages. First of all, you have a very direct relationship with the customers, so you can listen to feedback, improve. The feedback loop is very fast. You can improve the product very fast. You can give better service. You can focus on just a few products rather than having massive collection, which big brands need to have. The whole business is smaller, so it's easier to control every channel, etc. The difficulty is to scale, to maintain that personal relationship as you scale.
Absolutely. Do you guys have some great stories from the startup trenches, those early days before scaling was even a thing? We're talking about luxury here, but I love some really unluxurious stories. Really, anything that comes to mind?
I've got loads, but they're really, I don't know whether you can talk about them on camera. Actually, we had the Bremont. There was a lot of unluxury type thing. You're at the beginning, we do a lot of events, and that was the way you built the brand. It's like being a really bad rock band. You have to go around and keep touring, and you're going to jewelers, and you're lugging stuff around, and you just have to do that. But the brand before, we had a business before, which is very, very different, which was, it was digital distribution for record labels and stuff. We used to do a lot of filming. I just remember one event when, I remember it was V99, this is how old it was. So 1999, and Giles and I, we're doing a broadcast live from there. We're putting it onto the internet. This is on the internet for the first time. And it's a beautiful weekend. It's sort of weather like this. And behind the stage, this is where all the wiring was and that sort of stuff. And at the end of the weekend, imagine there's 100,000 people there. We were clearing up all of the wires and that sort of stuff and putting it back in the car, in the trunk, in the van thing. And I was talking to Giles, and we're wading through all this water. I was like, Giles, I just can't remember it raining this weekend. This is really, really weird. And then we sort of realized we're wading through 6 inches of pee because everyone had come to the front of the stage and just that's where they peed. So that's the more glamorous side of setting up a brand.
Maybe that's your memoir title, wading through 6 inches of pee.
A similar story. I have many. Once we were doing the window display for one of the stores, and we wanted to buy some sand because it was summer. We wanted to have a small beach so someone read the number wrong. Instead of buying 500 grams of sand, they bought 500 kilos. And so they came with a massive van in front of the store to deliver this huge amount of sand, and they wouldn't take the delivery back. So we had to keep delivery, and so luckily back then the office was close to the store, and we built a small beach on the back of the office in our garden.
Wow, that's good.
I guess on the less fun side, the stories that really stuck to mind is like the first time a celebrity buys the product, or those are really unexpected.
Yeah. Can you think of any sort of breakthrough moments like that early on? I know you had a lot of sort of influential admirers, so to speak, who wore your shirts. But who were some of them that sort of helped you break out?
Well, in the UK for sure was Prince William. We didn't know he was buying, but a customer sent us a screenshot from the TV. Is that your shirt? And then eventually we found out it was him. But the first time someone that I admired by the product was the founder of Ocado. And when we saw that someone was buying with an Ocado email, and I said, like, that's strange because technically they're not able to afford the product. But then the friend told me, no, that's the CEO, okay. Other stories. One of the people I admire a lot is the CEO of Walt Disney, Bob Iger, and so he was probably another one of the very early famous customers.
How can you make something like that happen? Are you just waiting? Is it luck, or did you have a kind of a seeding, a gifting policy? Did you give it to everyone you met?
I think a brand has to be authentic, and if you are consistent over a long period of time and create a great product, eventually people talk to each other. I think for Prince William was, we started having customers in some of the polo clubs around the UK, and also some of the employees of where he lives were buying the product. Bob Iger, I have no idea. He likes shirts with big collars, and I think he stumbled upon us. But I guess these are normal people, right? So they need to wear something, they need to eat something, they need to go somewhere on vacation. And they'll make decisions like a normal person.
Exactly. And Nick, what about you? Did you have any influential admirers early on, or what were some of your breakthroughs?
Yeah, no, I think no, we're very lucky. We had some really nice, well, lovely people wearing the brand, but it was all done. We never could afford to pay anyone. You know, it's like, and we can't afford to. When you set up your own brand, you know, making a watch, you're counting the watches in, you're counting them out. They're expensive things to make, so you can't sort of dosh them out to everyone. So if someone, I think if you're a bigger brand, again, you have more purchasing power and you can do that, but we couldn't do that. So it's very much down to people who believed in the brand, believed in what we're about, and were wanting something slightly quirky and different. So we're very lucky. We had very early on, I'm trying to remember now, Orlando Bloom, he wore a lot of them. Tom Cruise bought loads. Who else do we have? Hugh Laurie, Harrison Ford, Tom Hardy. You know, we just went on and on. So there's some really good people. But
and that was all organic. You didn't
organic, yeah. Because you can't afford to pay these guys.
So how do you think Tom Cruise is stumbling upon a Bremont watch? He loves planes and things, doesn't he?
To be fair, Tom Cruise, we knew through flying. Sorry, that's my phone. We knew through flying, but the others are just, again, so Harrison would love the brand through flying, you know, and there'll be that sort of connection. And
let's talk about then some of the what's the opposite of a breakthrough? Pitfalls early on. What were some of the blind alleys that you went down? Some of the things that ended up sucking loads of your time and energy that if you could go back, you would just erase entirely from your history. Nick, what did you pursue that turned out to be a false errand?
It's difficult, isn't it, when you go back and say, what would you have done differently? I think you make this choice, and when you start up a brand, you have two choices. You can either do it very, very organically, or you can go quicker, and go quicker, especially in the watch industry, means investment. I've always worked with my brother, and I love working with my brother. And, you know, if we're involved with the brand that we just have between ourselves, I love that feeling of just having nobody else involved. So Bremont, we got some investors in fairly earlier on. So it changes your mindset a little bit. It's still your brand, and it's still, you live and breathe it for 20 years. But I would have probably, the difficulty with watches is because it's so expensive to get into. Every time you're ordering 500 watches, 1,000 watches, 2,000 watches, it's a huge amount of cash flow, so working capital. So you have to be slightly careful. But I would have probably done it a bit more organically, rather than we were pretty keen on just growing quite quickly, and we want, watchmaking normally happens, and for that reason, over generations. So you see this is 4th generation brand or 5th generation, or we've been going 250 years. That's why everyone in the watch industry is trading off history, because it takes so bloody long. Yeah. It's really hard to, unless you sort of supercharge it, which we did a bit.
And did you have any products that didn't work or weren't popular, any sort of duds?
I think we had products where we were, there's a lot of wording in this industry which you have to be very, very careful of, whether it's, manufactured in-house and that sort of stuff. And we made a mistake with that once, saying something was more or in-house manufactured, which way it was around now. But the difficulty in the watch industry as well, Giles and I were immersed in it. So we knew absolutely everything, because the first 5 years we're in Switzerland, talking to all these suppliers who'd barely talked to you because who were you? And you started, from the ground up, understanding how the supply chain worked. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's all this sort of stuff going on. So probably too much. And, so anyway, so we have made mistakes, but also we did a lot of really great stuff. So,
yeah, I think it's worked out. Luca, what about you? Any alleyways you went down, any products you pursued that didn't work?
The product, not so much, also because, as I explained, when you're direct to consumer, you have a very fast feedback improvement loop. So usually when we produce something new, we don't go too heavy on the first batches. And effectively, we do product development when the product is live. But there are some, and by the way, you always learn from mistakes, so it's good to make them. And if you're not making mistakes, it means you're not trying enough. But for instance, in our business, opening stores, it's something that requires long-term thinking and allocation of capital. And sometimes, in the early days, we were less analytical about country, city, street. Like we were a bit more trusting our sixth sense, and we opened stores that ended up being much less profitable than other. And in retrospect, it was clear what were the reasons. So now we are much more analytical and data-oriented in that.
Yeah, I was in Soho in New York last week, and your shop is beautiful there. It fits right in, but it really also stands out.
That was another breakthrough moment besides Prince William. I was in New York. I remember we really wanted to have a store. It was just a few months before COVID, by the way. So lack of luck plays in multiple ways. But I was looking for a store. I had in mind the size, and I couldn't find it. And one of our customers from London told us, I own a store in New York. And I remember that afternoon, I had a flight in the evening, and I walked the whole day. And last stop of the day, I said, I'm going to see this store, even if it's 3 times bigger than what we need, and we couldn't afford it. But I loved it, and so I told the guy, look, I love the store, we can't afford it. We need 1/3 of the square feet, so if you want, we'll pay 1/3 for the first 2 years, and then we pay full price if it works. And he said, yes.
Wow, that's great. Unbelievable.
Very easy to get stores wrong, though, where you can go in somewhere and it's booming, and then 2 years later that place is not where it's at.
Have you had physical retail stores?
Yeah, we've had a few of those.
Yeah.
You can be on Madison Avenue, and then that part of the Madison Avenue doesn't, moves up or down, or it's really difficult. I find that bit the hardest of the lot, actually, trying to find good locations.
So if you needed to open a store next week for your brands, any of them, where in the world would you do it? Would it be in London? Would it be somewhere else entirely? Which neighborhoods should we be backing, basically?
I just came back from a trip in Asia, Japan, Seoul, and Dubai. So for me, it would be for sure Dubai Mall. But again, something are obvious, right? As the 100 million people visit that mall, and all the brands that have a store there, that's the best performing stores in the world. Yeah. You cannot do wrong there. So.
What about you, Nick? Where would you go?
I don't know. I think it's difficult. I find all of them quite challenging, as in trying to find the right location. It's also, I'm taking a bit of a step back now, but you could be in a great place in LA, and then that changes. With everything that's gone in LA, you can be. But I think it'd be nice our brand is sort of Bremont stronger in the UK, US. Somewhere in the Middle East would be nice. That works. We have got a lot of interest from there. So
absolutely. You're both, Nick, your brands are obviously very, very English, and you manufacture Mokes in Leamington, Yard Lead. Where's that made? That's
Birmingham.
In Birmingham, and of course Bremont is in Henley. Luca, you are an Italian, but you came, London was really where the brand grew. A lot of people are down on London. We were just having the startup investment talk, and it felt negative towards London, which maybe is fine if you're trying to raise £100 million. But what do you guys think about London as a creative place, as a place for brands to launch? We've got an amazing heritage just in the square mile around us now of incredible luxury, don't we?
It still works. London's great. I think London's fantastic. I think obviously perceptions change over time. I think Brexit was annoying. I think most of us probably like Europe, don't we? And so things like that have just tainted the city. But I think that will come back. And I think there's so much history here. You go to so many cities around the world, and there just isn't the history. It's so cosmopolitan. There's so much to see and do, and it's always going to be there. And it's going to, if it's not having its finest moment right this second, it will shortly, because it's got so much to offer.
What about you, Luca?
For me, it was the obvious choice to have London as one of the first cities where we really pushed the brand. I never thought that I would start a brand in Italy and become famous in Italy, it was much easier to produce in Italy and sell to people abroad. And besides that, London is a great place to attract talent, which is important for a company.
Absolutely. Let's talk about marketing as brands grow and we need to get more and more customers. How has the mix of what you guys do in marketing changed over recent years? And maybe a good way to think about that is, can we rank in order the following 3 things as marketing tools? Influencers, ooh, horrible word. Influencers, organic media, so I guess PR and press, and then paid advertising and social, or maybe even digital or print.
When now or when we started? Or
right at this moment in time, let's make it easy. What's the mix, do you think?
I hate to say this, but influencers, if you get the right one, are incredibly powerful. So, but not, I think the right type of influencers is really important. And I thought I'd never say this, and I'm such a geriatric when it comes to sort of this sort of thing. But take Yard of Lead. There's this amazing guy who is an incredible blacksmith. He makes amazing stuff, and he's got this YouTube channel with, I don't know, 4 or 5 million people. And he just wanted to come see the way Yard of Lead pens are being made. So he came along, and he did this. He didn't want to talk to us. He just wanted to talk to the guys on the shop floor making these incredible things. When it came out, did this video, it was more traffic, more sales than anything we'd seen compared to Bremont being in Kingsman or any of these massive things we'd have with Bremont. And it was so, so powerful. So I think you can't ignore it now, but I think the influencers you choose, I think if you just willy-nilly stick your brand on anyone with followers, I don't think that's the sort of recipe for disaster in my book. But if you've got the right people who are talking with proper credibility and passion, I think it is still very, very, very useful. But when Bremont started, it was all about what PR can you get. Everything was about PR, really, and getting that story out there. So,
and what about then paid advertising right now?
Yeah, that's important. I think it's still important. You still got to build up your followers, and you've got to get the message out. It's really hard to get messaging out to, the followers if you don't boost stuff these days. And so performance marketing is still very important, especially if you're trying to go for a new territory. So if you're trying to sell cars in Florida, you've got to do performance marketing out there, and so they're all. It's interesting. They're all important in their own right, because you want to still get the story out there as well. And the best way of doing that is still with press.
Definitely. Luca.
So there are 2 big categories you didn't mention. One is stores, and one is out-of-home advertising, which I'll get back in a second. Things have changed since we started. Back in the days, 10 years ago, was the golden era of direct-to-consumer Facebook advertising, and then Instagram was very cheap. And then every year became more and more expensive. And not only that, but also more crowded, and more brands would pop up online, so people wouldn't engage much with those ads. However, digital ads is still the main percentage of our marketing spend. Influencers I don't like as much because I find them expensive and difficult to track them, to track how well it converts. But we do a little bit. It's a good part of the mix. Organic PR, very important to give authority to the brand, credibility. But again, it's difficult to get it as scalable. We find the stores to be very important as well. Like, we have a store in Kings Road, and 15 million people a year walk on Kings Road.
Wow.
Now, if you give a value to that billboard, is significant. So if you have stores in some of the key streets in the world, I think it's a great way to give brand awareness. And as digital costs came up, we started exploring other ways of doing marketing, particularly out of home. Billboards, taxis, trams, airports, billboards. And the funny thing is that over the years, as digital became the dominant part of the advertising world, the pricing of out-of-home went down. And also it's difficult to track it, but you just know it's very cheap once you calculate how many people walk in front of a billboard. And we started diverting some of the budget towards those activities, and I believe it's working.
Excellent. And what about print magazines? big, fat, lovely, beautiful, good-smelling men's lifestyle magazine. It's called Gentleman's Journal.
It's all about the publication. As in, if it's the right publication, it's definitely worth doing. But there's a lot which, you know, again, when do you remember everyone was doing a magazine and we're distributed at the airport, we're doing this, and you know damn well, you know, they do those 3,000 copies and they end up somewhere in the bin. But no, if it's the right publication, it still works very, very powerful.
Excellent. Glad to.
Gentleman Journal was the first magazine where we advertised, and we're still there.
Wonderful. Okay, brilliant. If you guys could set up a company in another space entirely right now, tomorrow, you have to do it. I'm going to give you £500,000 to do it. What field would you go into? And would it be... Yeah, no, that's the end of the question, actually. What field?
Look, the rational answer would be to start an AI company. Now is every entrepreneur, depending on when you're born, there are a few things to do, right? Now it's too late to create the next hardware company or the next social network, the next software company. But AI, now is the time for AI. However, you have to be technical and understand the industry. So I think you have to do something where you're passionate about, you know something about, you have some connection. So I think if I wasn't in fashion, I would be doing something in restaurants or in food. I always wanted to, I don't like Pret.
Hold on, there's a Luca Faloni taxi has just gone past.
You see?
That is unbelievably good. Sorry, that's very exciting. Did we plan that?
There is actually 100 of them around.
Are there? Okay.
And they're very cheap.
And
I hope you don't publish this online because then my competitor would have a hedge. But
okay. Sorry, you were saying something very, very interesting, and you start in restaurants and hospitality.
Yeah, so I'm all about efficiency, but I enjoy life, so I want good food. And I had Pret or all this fast food you have in London. So if I wasn't the Luca Faloni, I would have an Italian fast food chain, more expensive than Pret, more quality, and better. Yeah.
That's a good idea. Luca's.
Nothing revolutionary, but I think people need to eat, they need to dress, they need to have fun.
Yeah, absolutely they do. What about you, Nick? Where would you go? Or would you join Luca in his restaurant?
I'd certainly, you give us a few free meals. I'll be a founding member. It's funny, I've always, and Giles and I have always loved building things, as in making things tangible. But I've done that all my life, pretty much. I've got to the stage now, my wife correctly or very kindly pointed out that, Nick, do you realize you've probably got 25 summers left till you're too old to do cool stuff? Wow. And that was really nice of her. So at that point, I've always quite been into adventure and doing fun things. And I think I would probably set up a business in a sort of more, experience-led market. Just doing some really cool places, cool trips, working with brands. At this point in my life, I think it's because involved with other manufacturing anyway. I still am doing that, so I'd probably do something more along.
That's great.
That lines, because there's a lot of adventure to have out there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Before we're too old.
And if you can sort of, even if you break even, you're having amazing holidays every year. That's brilliant. Very clever.
And your wife thinks you're working.
Exactly. Wonderful. Well, before we open it out to the crowd, I'd just like to ask if you guys have one golden piece of advice for any luxury brand people, any luxury founders out there. What one piece of advice, if they're going to take that away, what would it be? Over to you, Luca.
I think to always, the product is the first thing and everything else follow. Stick to the quality of the product, always try to improve the product, and don't change too much your proposition over the years. Many of the brands that get acquired by the big groups now, they have the same playbook, like increase price, massively increase distribution, a little bit decrease quality maybe, I don't know. But that change, and then over time they lose some of their earlier customers. So always focus on product and everything else will follow.
Excellent. Nick?
Okay, not one, it might just slur into three, okay. But one is just do something you really enjoy, and then every day you go to work, it does not feel like work. These 20 years have gone so quickly, and it's been the most fun. Met some really interesting people. The other thing is, Giles and I have this thing called the 3 times rule, where I remember our accountant told us the time, we first ever accountant, she said, look, we sat down and she said, look, everything's going to take 3 times longer, 3 times harder, and 3 times more expensive than you ever believe. And it's so true. Everything was right. So the 3 times rule. And then I think just don't, everyone, I mean, clothes, cashmere, watches, they're not unique. We're not the only ones doing this yet. Everyone you'll talk to will say, look, it's a crowded market. You're up against Rolex, you're up against Breitling, you're up against whoever, IWC. You haven't got a chance. You haven't got a chance. But actually, if you focus, as you said, on the product and get that so right, and people have a sense of belonging to your to what you're doing, then you've got a really good chance of making it work. But there'll be some highs and lows, and the passion has got to get you through these lows. So that's why I do something you enjoy.
Definitely. I think that's brilliant advice. Luca, were you going to?
Well, if you listen to people in Silicon Valley, they tell you, start something only if you can make it 10x better than the next player in the market. So one of my rules was make it 10% better in all areas and build from there.
Yeah.
That's more realistic and will lead to a lot of better products over the years.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, should we put it out to the crowd then? We do have a floating microphone somewhere. Harvey's got it. If anyone's got any questions, this lady in the pink shirt.
Hi there. What is your advice on community building and engaging with your community? You have a good product, but as Nick said, it's about belonging there. You're creating a movement, and people buy your product as well because they want to be part of what you stand for, of your world.
For us, it was everything for Bremont. It was, and it started where, I think a lot of brands were careful or worried about almost getting too close to their customer, but we had no choice, and that's actually what we wanted to do. So we did things like, we had the Bremont Ventures Club. So a lot of the brand was about aviation, it was about adventure, it was about being British. But the adventure thing, we had our stores literally just around the corner off on South Audley Street. That was our first store, and it was a great thing, by the way. Proper billboard as a brand. Just it's never too early to open a store. I really don't. It's just amazing. Don't need too many. Anyway, but Adventurers Club. So what we would do every month or so, we'd have someone who stood up literally on a soapbox and talked about the latest adventure they've been on. It could be adventure in design, it could be adventure in business, it could be adventure as in I've climbed Everest several times, or whatever it may be. But coming to those talks were all these Bremont people, a lot of them hadn't bought a watch, but they became interested in the brand, and they felt you'd see the same faces, but you'd see new faces. And we got this whole and sort of collective of people who really became immersed in the brand, and then you'd go and do one in Manchester or somewhere else or LA, and they'd follow you around, and it was a really lovely thing to do. And I think that sense of, as I said, belonging is so incredibly important, and it's something which you can really offer, which a larger brand can't. Just by the nature of being so big, you can't be part of a brand in the same way. I don't know if you felt that. No,
so having the stores improved a lot compared to when we were online only. We use them a lot for events, and also we try to now with the loyalty program to engage more with the customers, to learn from them and to become their basically brand of choice forever. I think it's very important. The only thing is it takes a lot of effort and is not as scalable as some of the other initiatives. So again, you need to have a mix of everything. Maybe.
Excellent. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? This gentleman here.
Nick, questions for you in regards to the battle. Hi, Nick. The questions for you in regards to the battle of the analog watches versus the digital watches like Apple and Garmin and so on. What do you think of that eventually will happen at the end? Who will win? And who will dominate the market by the end of this? I don't know what the time-wise. And the second question, you mentioned you work with your brother. How is it, and what would you be advice on relation into the, building the relation with your brother in the work and also on apart from the work, and just to not really lose this connectivity and working on the family business? Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. So when we started, 2002, smartwatches were just coming in, and I remember everyone saying, "You're absolutely mad. Do you realize no one's going to wear mechanical watches anymore?" We all know what the time is from looking at our phone. We all, if you're in the office, you've looked at your computer. We all know what the time is. So why do you need a mechanical? Why do you want to spend £5,000 on a watch? But actually, what you realize is one, it's a lot more than just telling the time. And what got Giles and I into the watch is actually I've got the watch my father was wearing when he died, and Giles has got the watch when we sailed around the world and that sort of stuff that my father wore, and they mean something. And so we realized quite quickly that they meant something to us, they meant something to other people. Smartwatches are disposable items. They're like phones. You're not attached to them. I find them a real pain in the ass. They're tracking you the whole time. You get up and you go, oh my gosh, my heart rate variability is low or high or something. And I had one of those Aura rings, and I couldn't wear it after a while. I found it so stressful. But an Apple Watch is, in 2 or 3 years' time, it's going to be in the bin, and so it's not sustainable. So you're buying a mechanical watch for a very, very different reason. A third of Bremont's business at the end was military, if not 40%. And the military guys would buy a watch, one, because it was almost like having a tattoo on your arm. It's like, look, I fly F-35s, and you get free drinks at the bar, obviously, if you fly an F-35. So that was really important. But it's also, I want 3 of them. I flew the F4 Phantom, flew the F-35, the F-22, and I've got 3 kids, and I want each one of them to have a watch that I've worn in the air. And so it means so much more than that. So that's and the same with the Ardent Lead with the pens. People now are writing far less, but actually they're not. When you talk to people who sit down, journaling's become a big thing, writing a lovely thank you letter, it's so much nicer than just having this sort of virtual world. Working with my brother, it's been a lot of fun. We're very similar. We're not confrontational, so it works. We're not great ones for arguing, but we'll stand up for each. If you do have a strong view, and you tend to sort of listen to the other person. But also, trust is so important in business. I know so many friends who've set up great businesses, and suddenly it's all fallen apart because someone's betrayed them or something like that. And it can have that in the family, but with Giles and I, it's, this trust is implicit, and that's really helped. And also, you're both going to work the same, so you both really want it to succeed, because you really want to make your mother proud, you see. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all really about. Actually, on the time thing, Matthew Syed in The Times had a great article yesterday, a great column, about how a digital watch gives you a snapshot of what the time is right now, but it gives you no sense of context of what comes afterwards. So you're living in a permanent present. But if you're looking at a watch face, you can see that 4, 5, 6, it's perspective. And actually he said something which is too intelligent for me to remember, that the ancient Greeks had 2 words for time. One which was time now, one which was time as an evolving concept.
But also...
And it does a very different thing psychologically, looking at that watch.
So true.
So different to looking at a digital watch, which says, now, do this now.
Also, again, going back to the military, you're not allowed to wear a smartwatch in any of the briefings. I mean, you're all being tracked if you're wearing a smartwatch. There's that sense of, actually, I want to be off grid a little bit and just go back to where we were. So there's that side of things as well, which I like. And also, if you're doing a bit of an adventure, your battery's going to run out in 2 or 3 days. You need something that's going to carry on going.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we've got time for one more question. This gentleman here.
What was your greatest pitfall, and how did you turn it around?
Great question. What have been the single biggest problems, do you think, that threatened to scupper Luca Faloni once and for all, and how did you get over it?
I remember a time, it was March 2020, COVID, when they shut down, there was lockdown, and not only that, so retail revenue went to 0 immediately, and then online revenue, people the first week or 2 were quite scared to buy things online. They had other worries, and so there was 2 weeks that really immediately, you have a cash, as a business, you have a cash flow model where you put some contingency, right? Okay, what happens if revenue is down 10% from forecast? What happens if revenue is 20% down from forecast? You never put what happens if revenue is down 100% from forecast. And and well, most businesses had that problem at the time, but so I remember there was a moment I was in my house and I shouted because I really thought we were going under, right? And then I was discussing with my investors and with one of my senior team members, shall we shut down marketing, right? Because revenue is not coming in. But then we hold on marketing, on digital marketing, and we noticed that conversion was increasing after a few days. So we said, some people told me decrease marketing, and I said, actually, let's increase it compared to plan. And every week we kept increasing, and revenue lines went through the roof eventually. So that was the first year that really the company went on the next level.
Wow.
So sometimes like there are these moments that are really scary, but you always need to. The Chinese say you cannot catch fish in dark water. Sorry, you cannot catch fish in clean water.
Okay.
So in difficulties, there is always something to learn or to turn around.
Didn't that really annoy you? And just talking about COVID one second, where everyone came out of COVID, and a lot of people say, "Gee, it's the best time ever. I was in the sun with my family, working for." And when you're running a business, it was the most difficult time known to man. You're trying to talk to banks to keep you afloat and all that. So that was, yeah. But actually, ours was. There's been a few, obviously, but I think when you're pushing the boundaries, anything technology-wise. So ours was we're making the first sort of in-house movement in the UK. Huge amount of investment, time, effort, and we launched with a watch which was going to come out, be ready for Christmas, and obviously the usual things happen when actually it's going to be 3 or 4 months late, and it's dealing with, and then it might be another couple of months late after that, but you're dealing with all the customers and making sure they're still happy. But that's, I think, the same for anyone in this industry. It's very, very difficult because you're dealing with, human hair is 60 to 100 microns and you're machining to 2 microns. And it's fairly obvious if something's not telling the time. You can sell a car and it might be working to 95% of its ability, but with a watch, if it's not working to pretty much 100%, it's fairly obvious when you're selling it. So, yeah, we've had a few tight things, but yeah, COVID was really quite scary for any business owner, I think.
Absolutely. Wonderful. How are we doing for time?
Let me tell you. 3 minutes past. I just wonder if I set it properly now, I could.
Has anyone got a burning question? We've probably got time for squeeze one more in. Yeah, yes, please. Why not? Yes.
What do you think of the?
Sorry, there's a.
Hi, thanks. Now to you, Luca. What do you think of the current situations of the tariffs from the US and also of the Chinese productions of the luxury brands materials? I have a friend who traveled to China. She's like luxury brand fashion lover, and she said I've never seen something in my life that I'm quoting, even with my experience seeing all of this luxury, expensive stuff, I couldn't see the difference. So is it something kind of really potential damaging your business and generally market, and what do you think of that? I, of course, understand there is always behind building a brand, which I respect as well, as you mentioned about the watches as well, so it's something you treasure more. But do you think the customers will once ask them themselves, why I'm paying for this, more?
Okay, many questions in one.
Sorry.
No.
It's great, it's great.
Tariff, first of all, I think they're normalizing. Today, actually, they reached an agreement with China. Last week was with the UK. I think they will normalize. And even then, again, you cannot catch fish in clean water. For us, US is 40% of our line revenue. And we checked, in the last few weeks, we checked what's happening to digital advertising. And by the way, the markets are always efficient. They tell you what's going on. I mean, not only stock markets, but also I like to look at digital advertising markets. Cost of showing ads on Meta in America was 40% down in April. Why? Because all the Chinese, Shane and the other Chinese players, they stopped completely marketing in America because they couldn't sell. So we ship from Europe. for us was actually okay in America. We are well priced compared to the luxury players. We give value, so in a recession or in a difficult market, people always revert to where there is more value. So I think we were well positioned to take advantage of whatever is happening. To the other questions about, let's say, perception of luxury or is made in China the same as, the reason why I started the brand was exactly because, in 2012 in San Francisco, when I actually learned about Allbirds and Warby Parkers, all those direct-to-consumer players, I met once someone, Eduardo Zegna from the Zegna family, and he explained me how the industry works. He explained me the players charge 10x, but if you do direct-to-consumer, you can charge 3x. And I immediately thought, you can give better value to customer than what is out there. Basically, the greed of the luxury player was our opportunity. So I think the markets are becoming more transparent, customers are more informed. Now it's been 10 years that there are direct-to-consumer brands, so people have figured out. It used to be you get what you pay for because wholesale was the only channel to get to market. So if you want to produce made in Italy or made in France, which was more expensive than made in China, people have to pay very high prices. Now it's like you get what you pay for if you are smart. Then is made in China the same as made in Europe, made in Italy, made in France? They're getting closer, depends on the product. The quality control is not there. So it's good for certain products, not for the more complicated product to make, if that answers the questions. I think long-term, some of the luxury players are in danger. And don't forget, sorry if I'm digressing.
No, it's good.
Long, but big groups like LVMH, they are effectively monopolists, okay? Not on the product. The consumer has a choice of what to buy. But think about if you're LVMH, you own many brands, what relationship you have with magazines. Hey, I buy 30 pages of advertising, but don't write about Luca Faloni. Think about what the relationship you have with Dubai Mall. We're going to bring you 40 brands, but we don't want A, B, and C. So they are monopolists, and they're trying to protect their unfair profit. Only recently came out that Dior was charging 2,500 for a bag that cost, 50 euro to make. That some vicuña was bought for very cheap prices. But the magazine don't write about that usually. They can't, okay? And to charge $2,000 for a jumper or $10,000 for a bag, you need to tell a very good story because the product costs very cheap to make. So people know that, the cost of making something in China is very cheap, or even making in Europe. They don't buy luxury players because of the cost. They buy because of the status you get. Ultra luxury player. Sorry for...
No, it's great. Very, very interesting. Thank you very much for your questions. And thank you to Nick and Luca for talking. Luca said, that you should make a product that's 10% better than other things. I think about people like you who make beautiful things, whether it's cars or pencils or shirts or trousers. But it's kind of those things where you have them and it does make your life, your day, seem just a few percentage points better. And I think in this day and age, that's all we can hope for. So thank you for doing that, but thank you especially for being here, and I'll eat at your restaurant, Luca, definitely. Thanks everyone for having us, for coming.